The multimillionaire CEO risked everything the moment he opened that lunchbox in the break room. What happened next changed his entire empire. Marcus Hale didn't mean to invade anyone's privacy. He'd been searching for his own forgotten lunch in the communal refrigerator at Hale Technologies' Seattle headquarters when he pulled out the wrong thermal bag, navy blue like his, but decorated with a small embroidered sunflower in the corner. The zipper opened before he could stop himself, and the scent hit him like a memory he couldn't place. Cinnamon, butter, something warm and impossibly homemade in a building where everyone ordered $17 salads. Inside sat 3 perfectly formed empanadas, golden and crimped by hand, wrapped in wax paper with a note scribbled in hasty cursive. "Don't forget to eat, Lena. Love always, Abuela." Marcus stared at that note longer than he should have. In his world of acquisition meetings and quarterly projections, nobody wrote notes like that anymore. Nobody's grandmother reminded them to eat. "That's mine." He looked up. The woman standing in the doorway of the break room wasn't anyone he recognized, which was impossible, because Marcus made it a point to know every department head, every team leader. She wore dark jeans and a forest green sweater that had seen better days, her black hair pulled into a ponytail that suggested efficiency over style. But her eyes, sharp, guarded, the color of strong coffee, held his without flinching. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, setting the lunchbox down on the counter between them like evidence. "I thought it was mine." "Right." Her tone suggested she didn't believe him for a second. Because billionaire CEOs definitely pack homemade empanadas in discount thermal bags. The sarcasm landed like a slap, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: embarrassment. He glanced down at his $1,000 suit, then at the lunchbox, then back at her. She'd already crossed the room, snatched the bag from the counter, and was checking the contents as if he might have stolen one. "I really didn't mean to. It's fine." She cut him off, zipping the bag closed with more force than necessary. "Just maybe respect people's property next time. Some of us can't afford to replace things." She turned to leave, and Marcus found himself saying, "What department are you in?" She paused at the doorway, glanced back with one eyebrow raised. "Does it matter? I like to know everyone who works here. Data analytics, 3rd floor. We're the people who actually make your company run while you take meetings about making meetings." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'm Lena Cordero, and you're Marcus Hale, in case you forgot." Then she was gone, leaving him alone in the break room with the fading scent of cinnamon and the uncomfortable realization that he'd just been thoroughly dismissed by someone who clearly wasn't impressed by his net worth. Marcus stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Outside, December rain streaked down the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Seattle into a watercolor blur. Somewhere in the building, 300 employees were working on projects he'd approved, systems he'd funded, dreams he'd invested in. But all he could think about was a woman with coffee-colored eyes who made her own lunch and didn't care who he was. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're curious to see where this unexpected connection leads, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Marcus makes a decision that will risk everything he's built. The next morning, Marcus found himself taking the stairs instead of the executive elevator. He told himself it was for exercise. He told himself it had nothing to do with the 3rd floor, or data analytics, or a woman who'd looked at him like he was just another person instead of a portfolio. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. The 3rd floor of Hale Technologies looked nothing like the executive suite. Where Marcus's world was all glass and minimalism, this space felt lived in. Desks cluttered with sticky notes, coffee mugs with faded logos, a string of battery-powered Christmas lights someone had draped across the water cooler, even though it was only the first week of December. Marcus spotted Lena immediately. She sat at a corner desk near the windows, 3 monitors arranged in an arc around her, fingers flying across the keyboard with the kind of focused intensity he recognized in himself during the early days, before success had insulated him from the actual work. He approached slowly, aware that several employees had already noticed him and were pretending not to stare. On Lena's desk sat the thermal lunchbox, the embroidered sunflower facing out like a small act of defiance. "Ms. Cordero." She didn't look up from her screens. "Mr. Hale, are you lost? The executive floor is 12 stories up. Easy mistake. I wanted to apologize properly for yesterday. You already apologized. I already accepted. We're done." Her tone was pleasant enough, but her attention never left the cascading numbers on her center monitor. Marcus should have left it there. Instead, he found himself leaning slightly to see what she was working on, a complex algorithm tracking user engagement patterns across their software platform. That's the retention model Johnson's team has been stuck on for weeks. Yeah, well, Johnson's team was looking at it wrong. Lena finally glanced up at him, and he caught something in her expression, pride mixed with resignation. They were tracking behavior from the top down. I flipped it. Started from the user's actual pain points instead of what we assume they should want. And I'll have it solved by lunch, which you're currently delaying, by the way. Marcus felt the corner of his mouth lift. Is lunch sacred to you? When my abuela wakes up at 5 a.m. to make it? Yes, extremely sacred. There was a weight to how she said it. Not just affection, but something closer to devotion. Marcus thought of his own meals, catered, expensive, eaten while reviewing documents. He couldn't remember the last time someone had made him anything with their hands. "What's in the empanadas?" The question came out before he could stop it. Lena studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he was mocking her. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because her expression softened slightly. "Carne guisada, my great-grandmother's recipe. Abuela says it tastes like home." "Where's home?" "El Paso. I moved here 3 years ago for the job. Abuela followed 6 months later because she said I was withering away in that cold, sad city." Lena's voice shifted when she quoted her grandmother, taking on a warmth and slight accent that made Marcus smile despite himself. "Seattle can be cold," Marcus agreed, "and sad, depending on the day. You live here, you should know." "I do, but I'm not sure I notice it anymore." The admission surprised him. He didn't usually volunteer anything personal to employees, but something about Lena's directness made pretense feel pointless. She tilted her head, studying him with those sharp coffee eyes. "That sounds lonely." Before Marcus could respond, before he could even process why those 3 words hit him somewhere tender, Lena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her entire demeanor shifted. The competent professional dissolved into something younger, more vulnerable. "I have to take this." She stood quickly, grabbing the phone. "It's Abuela's doctor." She was already walking toward the stairwell, phone pressed to her ear, and Marcus caught fragments. "What do you mean irregular? She was fine yesterday." "No, I can't leave work right now. I understand, but..." The stairwell door closed behind her, cutting off the rest. Marcus stood alone at her desk, the unsolved algorithm still glowing on her monitors, the lunchbox with its embroidered sunflower sitting beside her keyboard, like a small flag planted in enemy territory. Around him, employees pretended to work while absolutely watching him. He should leave. He should go back upstairs where he belonged, where everything made sense according to balance sheets and 5-year plans. Instead, he found himself looking at that lunchbox, thinking about a grandmother who woke before dawn to make food that tasted like home, and wondering what it must feel like to love someone so much that you'd follow them to a cold, sad city just to make sure they didn't wither away. When Lena returned 20 minutes later, her eyes were red but dry, her jaw set in a way that suggested she'd decided something difficult. She stopped short when she saw Marcus still standing at her desk. "You're still here. Is your grandmother okay?" Lena's professional mask wavered for just a second. "Blood pressure issues. They want to run more tests, but she doesn't have... The insurance doesn't..." She stopped herself, visibly pulling back. "It's fine. I'll figure it out." Marcus knew what she wasn't saying. He'd built his fortune on knowing what people needed before they asked for it. "If there's anything the company can do, I don't need charity." The words came out sharp, defensive. "I just need to work, which I can't do with you hovering." "Right." Marcus stepped back, properly chastised. "I'll let you get back to it." He made it 3 steps before Lena spoke again, her voice quieter. "Mr. Hale, thank you for asking." Marcus looked back at her, this woman who packed homemade lunches and solved impossible algorithms and loved her grandmother fiercely enough to turn pride into armor. "It's Marcus, and you're welcome." Their eyes held for a moment longer than professional, shorter than personal. Somewhere in that space between, something shifted. Small and undeniable, like the first crack in ice before spring. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus developed a habit he couldn't quite explain to himself. He started taking the stairs every morning, stopping by the 3rd floor under the pretense of checking on various projects. He told himself it was good management practice. He told himself he was just being thorough. He was still lying to himself. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to see if Lena Cordero had solved Johnson's retention problem. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted to see if she'd packed empanadas again. On the 5th visit, she called him out. "You know we have email, right?" Lena said without looking up from her keyboard. She'd added a small succulent to her desk, a tiny green rebellion against the fluorescent lighting. "And phones. And an entire messaging system you paid a ridiculous amount of money to implement." Marcus found himself smiling despite the dismissal. "I prefer face-to-face interaction." "No, you don't. You have your assistant schedule everything. I checked." She finally glanced at him, and there was amusement in her eyes now, layered under the sarcasm. "So why are you really here, Mr. Hale?" "Marcus," he corrected automatically. Then, because something about her directness made him want to be honest, "I wanted to see if you'd figured out the algorithm. 3 days ago, sent the solution to Johnson. He presented it in yesterday's meeting as his team's breakthrough." She said it matter-of-factly, without bitterness, but Marcus felt anger spike in his chest. "He took credit for your work? Welcome to corporate America. Want a medal for noticing?" But her eyes had gone distant, tired in a way that suggested this wasn't the first time. "It's fine. I'm not here for credit. I'm here for the paycheck." "That's not fine. That's how it works when you're not the billionaire." Lena's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. "When you're the girl from El Paso with the state school degree and the sick grandmother who can't afford private insurance, when you're expendable." The word hung between them like an accusation. Marcus thought about his corner office, his private elevator, the way people said yes before he finished asking questions. When had he last felt expendable? When had he last felt anything other than insulated from consequence? "You're not expendable," he said quietly. "You're brilliant. What you did with that algorithm. Johnson's entire team couldn't solve it in 6 weeks." Lena looked at him then, really looked at him, and Marcus felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with business. "Why do you care?" It was a good question. The honest answer was that he didn't know, or didn't want to admit what he was starting to suspect. That somewhere between the empanadas and the embroidered sunflower, and the way she'd looked when she was worried about her grandmother, something had shifted in him. Something he'd thought was safely locked away behind years of strategic thinking and emotional distance. "Because it's my company," Marcus said instead. "And I want it to be fair." Fair. Lena repeated the word like she was testing its weight. Then she laughed. Not unkindly. but with a weariness that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Okay, sure. Make it fair. I'll wait." She turned back to her monitors, effectively dismissing him. But as Marcus walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just failed some test he hadn't known he was taking. That afternoon, he called Johnson into his office. By evening, Lena Cordero had been transferred to a new position, Senior Innovation Analyst, reporting directly to Marcus with a 30% salary increase and full executive benefits, including comprehensive health insurance. He told himself it was just good business. He told himself he was simply correcting an injustice, recognizing talent, optimizing his company's resources. But when he signed the paperwork, all he could think about was the way Lena's voice had broken slightly when she'd talked about her grandmother's insurance, and how badly he wanted to fix something he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch. The next morning, Marcus arrived on the 3rd floor to find Lena's desk empty, her monitors dark, the succulent and the lunchbox both gone. For a moment, panic seized him. The irrational certainty that he'd overstepped, that she'd quit, that he'd somehow driven away the one person who looked at him like he was just a man instead of a net worth. Then he remembered. She worked for him now. Her office was on the executive floor, 3 doors down from his own. Marcus took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring his assistant's surprised greeting, heading straight for Lena's new space. The door was open. She stood with her back to him, staring out at the Seattle skyline, her shoulders rigid. "Lena." She turned slowly, and the expression on her face stopped him cold. Not gratitude, not excitement. Something closer to fury, layered over hurt. "What did you do?" Her voice shook slightly. "Marcus, what did you do? I promoted you. You deserved. You made me a charity case." The words came out flat, final. "You felt bad about my abuela, so you threw money at the problem. Like I'm some project you can fix. That's not, isn't it?" Lena crossed her arms, and Marcus recognized the gesture now. Armor, same as her sarcasm. "I've been at this company for 3 years. I've solved dozens of problems, improved systems, made this place run better. But the only time anyone notices is when the billionaire CEO feels guilty. That's not recognition, Marcus. That's pity." The accusation landed like a physical blow, because she wasn't entirely wrong. He had been thinking about her grandmother when he signed the paperwork. But she also wasn't entirely right about his motivations, and Marcus found himself stepping closer, needing her to understand something he barely understood himself. "I noticed you before I knew about your grandmother," he said quietly. "Before the lunchbox, even. I just didn't know it yet." Lena blinked, her anger wavering into confusion. "What does that even mean?" "It means I've been running this company on autopilot for 2 years. Making money, closing deals, building an empire, but not actually seeing any of it. Not feeling any of it." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, aware he was saying too much but unable to stop. "And then you looked at me in that break room like I was just some guy who'd made a mistake. Not a CEO, not a portfolio, just a guy. And something woke up in me that I'd thought was dead." The silence stretched between them, heavy with something neither seemed ready to name. Outside, December rain had started again, turning the windows into rivers of gray light. "So this promotion..." Lena's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something softer, more uncertain. "This wasn't about fixing me. This was about recognizing what I should have seen 3 years ago. You're exceptional, Lena. Not because I noticed. You were exceptional the whole time." Marcus held her gaze, letting her see whatever truth was written in his face. "But yes, I also wanted your grandmother to have the insurance she needs, because you shouldn't have to choose between taking care of someone you love and doing the work you're brilliant at. If that makes me a terrible person." It doesn't, Lena interrupted. Her eyes had gone bright. Not quite tears, but close. It makes you... I don't know what it makes you. Complicated. I can live with complicated. Can you? She studied him with that sharp, coffee-eyed intensity that made him feel perpetually off balance. Because I'm not some charity case you can save and move on from. I'm ambitious and stubborn, and I argue when I think someone's wrong, even if that someone is signing my paychecks. I don't know how to be grateful quietly. Marcus felt something in his chest expand, warm and dangerous. Good. I don't trust quiet gratitude. It usually means someone's lying. The corner of Lena's mouth twitched, that almost smile he was learning to watch for. So what now? I'm supposed to work 3 doors down from you and pretend this isn't weird. It's definitely weird, Marcus agreed. But maybe weird is better than autopilot. Lena laughed. A real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. And the sound did something to Marcus that he wasn't prepared to analyze. Not yet. Possibly not ever. Okay, she said finally. We'll try weird. But Marcus, if you ever make me a charity case again, I quit. Understood? Understood. She nodded once, satisfied, then turned back to the window. After a moment, Marcus came to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the rain-soaked city that had brought them to this strange, complicated moment. For what it's worth, Lena said quietly, thank you. For the insurance. Abuela starts treatment next week. Marcus's throat tightened. I'm glad. They stood there in comfortable silence, not quite touching, but aware of each other in every nerve. While outside, Seattle wept December rain, and inside something fragile and impossible continued to take root. The executive floor had a rhythm Marcus had forgotten he'd created. Polished efficiency, controlled ambition, everyone moving through choreographed roles with the precision of a Swiss watch. Lena's arrival disrupted everything. She brought the succulent. She brought the lunchbox with its embroidered sunflower. And she brought a complete inability to pretend that expensive furniture made bad ideas good. The first strategy meeting, she challenged Marcus's acquisition target. The second week, she rewrote the entire Q1 innovation pipeline. By the third week, half the executive team loved her, and the other half wanted her gone. Marcus had never been more fascinated by anything in his life. You're staring again, Lena said without looking up from her tablet. They were in his office reviewing market projections, and she'd taken up residence in the chair across from his desk like she belonged there. Which she did, but not in the way Marcus's pulse kept insisting. I'm thinking. You think loudly. But she was smiling slightly, that almost expression that made him want to make her fully smile just to see what it looked like. What about? About how you've completely destroyed my concentration. About how I stay late just hoping you'll still be working. About how I've started judging every decision by whether it would make you raise one skeptical eyebrow. The Meridian acquisition, Marcus lied. The board wants to move forward, but something feels off. Lena set down the tablet and gave him her full attention, which was its own kind of danger. Your instinct is right. Meridian looks good on paper, but their company culture is toxic. High turnover, multiple harassment complaints they've settled quietly, management that treats employees like resources instead of people. She paused. Remind you of anyone? The comparison stung because it was fair. 3 months ago, Marcus would have ignored the culture issues, focused on the profit margins, made the acquisition. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about women like Lena, brilliant, underpaid, invisible, who were probably drowning in Meridian's toxic culture right now. We'll pass on Meridian, he decided. Find me better options. Already did. Sent them to your secure folder this morning. Lena stood, gathering her materials. Anything else? I have Abuela's doctor appointment in an hour. How is she? Better. The new insurance coverage. Lena's voice softened. The treatments are working. She made empanadas yesterday. First time in weeks she had the energy. Marcus felt an absurd surge of relief, disproportionate to any professional relationship. That's wonderful. It is. Lena looked at him, and something passed between them, gratitude mixed with a wariness that suggested she still wasn't entirely sure what to do with his concern. Marcus, why are you really doing all this? Doing what? This. Listening to me. Changing strategies. Staying late to review projections you could have your analysts handle. She took a step closer, and Marcus's entire nervous system went on alert. I've been watching you. The way you look at me sometimes. It's not just professional. The accusation, because it was an accusation, however gently delivered, hung between them. Marcus could lie. Should lie. Every rule of professional conduct, every liability concern, every lesson he'd learned about power dynamics screamed at him to deflect. But Lena was looking at him with those coffee-colored eyes that saw through every defense he'd ever constructed, and Marcus found himself incapable of anything but truth. No, he said quietly, it's not just professional. Lena inhaled sharply. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows like accusation, and Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. Marcus. Whatever she was going to say vanished as his office door burst open. Richard Chen, his chief operating officer and oldest friend, stood in the doorway with a tablet, his expression urgent. We have a problem. Cyber attack. Someone's trying to break into our client database. Marcus was in motion before Richard finished speaking, but he caught Lena's expression as he moved past her, a complex mixture of relief and disappointment that matched exactly what was churning in his own chest. The problem, Marcus would realize later, wasn't the cyber attack itself. His security team handled it within 2 hours, tracked the source to a competitor's overeager consultant, and implemented new protocols to prevent future breaches. The problem was what Richard said as they were leaving the security floor, casual and thoughtless. Good thing you were alone when I interrupted. Can you imagine if Lena had overheard? She doesn't have the clearance for security breaches. We'd have had to let her go. Marcus stopped walking. What? Standard protocol. Anyone without level 5 clearance present during a security incident gets terminated. Liability issue. Richard shrugged. Though I guess it doesn't matter. Not like you'd be alone in your office with her anyway. That would be what? Marcus's voice had gone cold. Richard finally looked at him. Really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Marcus, tell me you're not. Not what? Getting involved with an employee. With Lena. Richard lowered his voice. Do you know what that would look like? The optics alone would destroy you. The board would have your head. And her. Jesus, Marcus, think about what it would do to her career. Everyone would say she slept her way up. That's not. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters what it looks like. Richard grabbed his arm, forcing Marcus to face him. I've known you for 15 years. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her, which is exactly why you need to stop before this becomes something you can't take back. Marcus pulled free, his mind racing through implications he'd been carefully avoiding. Richard was right. Every word was right. Marcus had built his entire empire on strategy and control. Getting emotionally involved with an employee was the opposite of both. But when he thought about Lena, the way she challenged him, saw him, made him feel awake for the first time in years, strategy felt hollow. Control felt like cowardice. I need to think, Marcus said finally. Think fast. Richard's tone gentled slightly. Because if you actually care about her, you'll do the right thing, which is to let her go before you ruin both your lives. Marcus made it back to his office to find it empty. Lena had left for her grandmother's appointment. On his desk sat a small thermos, the kind that came with homemade lunches. A sticky note on top read, "Coffee. You looked tired. L." He opened it. The scent of fresh brewed coffee, still warm, filled the air. Not the expensive single-origin beans his assistant ordered. Something simpler, stronger, with a hint of cinnamon. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, the thermos cradled in both hands, and confronted a truth that terrified him. He was falling for Lena Cordero, had maybe already fallen. And if Richard was right, if pursuing this would destroy her career, ruin her reputation, turn everything she'd earned into whispers about who she'd slept with to get there, then the most caring thing he could do was walk away. The thought made his chest physically ache. Outside, December rain fell on Seattle, cold and relentless, and Marcus drank coffee that tasted like cinnamon and home while trying to figure out how to protect someone from himself. For 3 days, Marcus avoided Lena. He scheduled meetings when she was with other teams, reviewed her reports via email, and took the elevator instead of the stairs. It was cowardly and obvious, and hurt more than he'd expected. On the 4th day, Lena cornered him in the parking garage. "Running away really doesn't suit you," she said, stepping in front of his car. The December evening had turned everything to shadows, and her breath fogged in the cold air. "Though I have to admit, it's a pretty clear message." Marcus killed the engine, not trusting himself to speak. "You've been avoiding me since Richard interrupted us." Lena crossed her arms, that armor again. "So let me guess. He told you getting involved with an employee would be complicated. Probably mentioned the board. Definitely mentioned the optics." She leaned against his hood, and Marcus could see she was shaking slightly, though whether from cold or anger or hurt, he couldn't tell. "Did I miss anything?" "Lena." "No, my turn to talk." Her voice cracked slightly. "For 3 days, I've been trying to figure out what I did wrong, whether I misread everything, whether that moment in your office was just in my head." She paused, and when she spoke again, the sarcasm was gone, replaced by raw honesty that made Marcus's chest constrict. "But then I realized, you're not avoiding me because you don't care. You're avoiding me because you do, and you think that makes you noble." The accuracy of it landed like a blade between his ribs. Marcus got out of the car slowly, carefully, maintaining distance because if he got too close, he'd touch her, and if he touched her, he'd be lost. "Richard was right," he said quietly. If this becomes something, everyone will say you slept your way into your position, that you manipulated me. Your achievements will disappear into speculation about what you did to earn them. I've seen it happen, Lena. I won't let it happen to you." "Let it?" Lena's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You think you get to decide what I can handle? What risks I'm willing to take? I'm trying to protect you. From what? From yourself? From me?" She pushed off the hood, closing the distance between them, and Marcus felt his careful control starting to fracture. "You think I don't know what people will say? I've known since the day you promoted me. I've heard the whispers already. Convenient timing. CEO's new pet project." "I don't care, Marcus. Because I know what I've earned, and I know why you promoted me, and I don't need anyone else's permission to own my accomplishments. This isn't just about you. No, it's about both of us. But you're so busy playing hero that you didn't bother asking what I want." Lena's eyes were bright now, fierce with unshed tears and frustration. "Do you know what I thought when you promoted me? After the anger faded? I thought maybe finally someone saw me. Not the girl from El Paso. Not the charity case. Not the expendable employee. Just Me. Marcus's control shattered completely. I do see you. That's the problem. I see you, and I can't think about anything else. I see you, and I want things I have no right to want. I see you, and I'm terrified I'll ruin you just by being close to you. Then ruin me. The words came out whispered, desperate. Or let me go. But stop protecting me from choices I haven't made yet. They stood there in the shadowy garage, breath fogging between them, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down like the December cold. Marcus thought about what Richard had said. Do the right thing. Let her go. But when he looked at Lena, at the stubborn set of her jaw, the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she was trembling and refusing to step back, he realized Richard had been wrong about what the right thing was. The right thing wasn't protecting her from gossip or speculation or difficult choices. The right thing was respecting her enough to trust her with the truth, even if it terrified him. I'm falling for you, Marcus said. The words rough and unpolished and more honest than anything he'd said in years. I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to do this without hurting you. And I'm afraid that wanting you makes me exactly like every other powerful man who's ever confused his position with permission. Lena's expression shifted, softened, into something that looked like relief mixed with wonder. You think you're the only one who's scared? Marcus, I've spent 3 years making myself invisible just to survive in corporate spaces. I don't do relationships because they're complicated and I can't afford distractions. But then you looked at me like I mattered, and everything I'd carefully planned stopped making sense. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm falling too. And yes, it's terrifying. And yes, people will talk. But I didn't come to Seattle to be safe. She took the last step between them, close enough now that Marcus could smell the faint trace of her shampoo, something citrus and clean. I came here to build something that mattered. Maybe that something is my career. Or maybe... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, and cupped her face in both hands. Her skin was cold from the December air, but underneath he could feel the warmth of her, alive and real, and looking at him like he'd hung the stars. If we do this, he said softly, I need you to know, I'll step back. From your performance reviews, from your direct supervision. I'll recuse myself from anything that could compromise your position. Your achievements will be yours, evaluated by people who have nothing to do with us. That's your solution? Lena's lips quirked into that almost smile. Bureaucracy? It's all I have. Professional distance where it matters, clear boundaries, everything documented and transparent, so that when people question your success, and they will, the records will prove it has nothing to do with me. You've already thought this through. For 3 days, while avoiding you and drinking coffee that tasted like cinnamon and trying to figure out how to want you without destroying you. Lena reached up, covering his hands with her own. You know what Abuela told me this morning? She said in El Paso, there's this old saying, El amor no se esconde, pero se cuida. A love doesn't hide, but it takes care. Her eyes searched his. That's what you're trying to do, isn't it? Take care. I'm trying, Marcus admitted. I'm probably failing. You're not. Lena leaned into his touch slightly, and Marcus felt his entire world narrow to this moment. Cold garage, December shadows, a woman who'd crashed into his carefully controlled life and set everything on fire. But Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if this gets too hard, if the pressure becomes too much, if it starts affecting my work or your company, promise me we'll talk about it. No more avoiding. No more decisions made to protect me without asking me first. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. Marcus had built a 9-figure company on his ability to assess risk, and make calculated decisions. Nothing about this moment was calculated. Everything about it was risk. But when he looked at Lena, brilliant, stubborn, brave enough to demand partnership instead of protection, he realized some things were worth more than strategy. "I promise," he said. "Together." Then he kissed her, soft and careful and trembling with everything he'd been trying to deny. And Lena kissed him back like she was claiming something that had always belonged to her. And for the first time in 3 days, Marcus could breathe properly again. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lena rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" "Now we figure it out as we go," Marcus said. "And probably mess up occasionally, and definitely deal with some extremely awkward conversations." "Sounds perfect." Lena smiled, fully smiled, the kind that lit up her entire face, and Marcus understood why he'd been willing to risk everything for this. "Though fair warning, Abuela's going to interrogate you mercilessly when she finds out. I can handle interrogation. We'll see." But she was still smiling, and Marcus was still holding her, and overhead the Seattle sky had finally stopped raining, leaving everything clean and new and full of terrifying possibility. The first 3 weeks of them were careful, professional at work, with the kind of formal distance that made Richard visibly relax. Private everywhere else. Dinners where they talked until Marcus's coffee went cold. Walks through December-lit streets where Lena pointed out constellations he'd forgotten existed. Quiet evenings in his apartment where she taught him to make empanadas. And he learned that her laugh, unguarded and full, was his new favorite sound. Then the board meeting happened. Marcus had known it was coming. The year-end review where board members evaluated company performance and executive decisions. He'd prepared thoroughly, brought comprehensive data, felt confident in every choice he'd made. He hadn't prepared for Gregory Townsend. Townsend was old money, board member since Marcus's father had run the company, deeply invested in tradition and optics. He waited until the end of the meeting, until everyone was gathering their materials, to drop his bomb. "Before we adjourn, Marcus, I'd like to discuss the Cordero situation." The room went quiet. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. "I'm not sure what you mean. Don't be coy. Everyone's noticed your involvement with a junior employee." Townsend leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual menace. "I've done some research on Ms. Cordero. Impressive credentials, I'll admit. But her promotion timing is, shall we say, questionable, as is her sudden access to executive-level meetings and decisions." Lena earned her position. "I'm sure she did. But perception matters, Marcus. And right now, the perception is that you promoted your girlfriend and are using company resources to elevate her career." Townsend's smile was blade thin. "I have investors asking questions, shareholders concerned about your judgment. Unless you can provide compelling evidence that this relationship doesn't represent a massive conflict of interest, I'll be recommending we open a formal investigation." Marcus's hands clenched under the table. He'd anticipated gossip, even criticism. He hadn't anticipated this, a coordinated attack designed to question not just his judgment, but Lena's integrity. "There's no conflict," Richard interjected quickly. Marcus recused himself from Lena's direct supervision. Her performance reviews are handled by department heads. Everything's documented. Documentation can be manipulated. Townsend cut him off. "Here's what I propose. Ms. Cordero takes a leave of absence while we investigate. If everything is as above board as you claim, she can return with no penalty. If not," he shrugged, "well, we'll deal with that when it comes." "You want me to suspend her for being in a relationship with me?" Marcus's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Based on speculation? I want you to demonstrate that this company's leadership takes conflicts of interest seriously. That we don't play favorites, even with people we're sleeping with." The crude reduction of everything Lena was, her brilliance, her work ethic, her achievements, into that single phrase made Marcus's vision tunnel. He thought about her face that night in the garage, the way she'd demanded to be trusted with her own choices. He thought about every whisper she'd endured, every doubt she'd faced, every time someone had tried to make her small. "No," Marcus said. "I'm sorry?" "No investigation. No leave of absence. No penalty for Lena, because I fell in love with someone whose talent you refuse to acknowledge." Marcus stood, and every eye in the room tracked him. "And if you try to move forward with this, Gregory, I'll have something to say too." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact, because I've also done some research." Marcus pulled out his tablet, called up documents he'd spent 3 weeks compiling. "I know about the Meridian board seat you were offered, the one you didn't disclose despite your duty to report conflicts of interest. I know about your nephew's consulting firm that you've steered $4 million of company contracts toward. I know about the harassment settlement you personally approved 15 years ago, burying allegations against an executive who should have been fired." Townsend's face had gone pale. "How dare you? How dare I what? Point out hypocrisy? Hold you to the same standards you're trying to weaponize against Lena?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice steel wrapped in ice. "You want to talk about conflicts of interest, Gregory? Let's talk. In front of the entire board, with lawyers present. I'm happy to have that conversation." The silence was absolute. Richard's eyes had gone wide. The other board members were carefully not looking at anyone. Finally, Townsend stood, gathering his materials with shaking hands. "This isn't over." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "It is. Either you resign from this board, or I release every document I've compiled to our shareholders. Your choice. You have until tomorrow." Townsend left without another word. The remaining board members followed quickly, until only Richard remained, staring at Marcus like he'd never seen him before. "That was," Richard started, "necessary." Marcus sat down heavily, the adrenaline finally starting to fade. "He was going after Lena to get to me. I won't let that happen. You just made a powerful enemy. I just protected someone I love. If that costs me politically, fine. But I won't. I can't stand by while someone tries to destroy her for being with me." Marcus looked at his oldest friend. "You were right about one thing. I had to choose. Between playing it safe and doing what matters. I chose." Richard studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think you chose right, though Townsend's not going to go quietly. Let him fight. I have receipts for years." As it turned out, Marcus was right. Townsend resigned by email that evening, citing personal reasons. The board never opened an investigation. And while there were whispers and speculation, there were also facts. Lena's performance metrics, her innovations, her documentable impact on company growth. But Marcus knew the real challenge came that night, when he had to tell Lena what he'd done. She listened in silence as he explained. The meeting, Townsend's threat, the choice Marcus had made to fight rather than let her be investigated. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time, standing at his apartment window looking out at the Seattle lights. "You threatened a board member for me," she said finally. "I exposed a hypocrite who was trying to hurt you." "Marcus," Lena turned to face him, and her expression was complex. Gratitude mixed with something that looked like pain. "You just made yourself incredibly vulnerable. If Townsend goes public, if he fights back, then I'll deal with it. But I won't apologize for protecting you. I didn't need protecting." The words came out sharper than she probably intended. "I could have handled an investigation. I have the records. I know my work speaks for itself. I know that. But you saw someone attacking me and you made a choice." Lena crossed to him, and Marcus couldn't read her expression now. "Do you understand what you did?" You risked your reputation, your board position, possibly your entire company. For me, yes. That's... She stopped, her eyes bright. That's the most terrifying and wonderful thing anyone's ever done for me. And I don't know whether to kiss you or shake you for being so reckless. Marcus felt something in his chest loosen. Both seem reasonable. Lena laughed, that full, unguarded sound, and pulled him close. You're impossible, and stubborn, and I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life arguing with you about your hero complex. Rest of your life? Marcus's heart kicked against his ribs. Did I stutter? But she was smiling now, fierce and sure. You just publicly declared that I matter more than board politics. You think I'm letting you take that back? Marcus kissed her then, deep and certain, pouring everything he couldn't quite say into the press of his mouth against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her head against his chest. Thank you, she whispered, for fighting for me, even though I would have fought for myself. I know you would have. That's why I love you. He felt her smile against his shirt. I love you too, even when you're being overprotective and reckless. Especially then? Especially then. Outside, Seattle glittered with December lights, and inside, Marcus held the woman who'd broken through every defense he'd built. And for the first time since he'd opened that lunchbox months ago, everything felt exactly right. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the Hale Technologies break room, the same room where this had all started, watching Lena teach his COO how to crimp empanadas. No, like this. See? You have to seal the edges properly, or all the filling leaks out during baking. Lena demonstrated with patient efficiency, while Richard Chen fumbled with dough, his expression one of intense concentration. Marcus, your friend is hopeless. I'm aware, Marcus said, not even trying to hide his smile. The break room had changed since that December morning. The string of Christmas lights was now year-round, the coffee had mysteriously improved, and someone, Marcus suspected Lena, had hung a bulletin board where employees shared recipes and restaurant recommendations. Small changes, but they'd shifted the atmosphere from sterile corporate to something that felt lived in, human, like what had happened to Marcus himself. Abuela says if Richard's going to join us for Sunday dinners, he needs to know how to help cook, Lena explained, finally taking pity and helping Richard seal his mangled empanada. It's a family rule. Marcus felt warmth bloom in his chest at the casual way she said family. In the 6 months since the board meeting, they'd built something that looked like that. Sunday dinners with Lena's grandmother, whose health had stabilized beautifully. Weeknight evenings where they cooked together while arguing about work strategy. Mornings where Marcus woke up to find Lena stealing blankets and hogging the bathroom and looking at him like he was exactly where he belonged. The company had stabilized too. After Townsend's departure, Marcus had implemented new transparency policies, established an independent ethics board, and created mentorship programs specifically designed to identify and elevate talent from overlooked backgrounds. Lena led most of those initiatives, not because of Marcus, but because the board had voted her into a VP position based on her innovations and impact. People still whispered sometimes, still speculated, but the numbers spoke louder. Company growth, employee retention, innovation metrics that consistently exceeded projections. Lena had earned every accolade, and increasingly, people were starting to recognize it. Done! Richard held up his empanada triumphantly. It looked like a small, doughy disaster. That's an attempt, Lena said diplomatically. Then, to Marcus, your turn. Show him how it's done. Marcus joined them at the counter, and Lena guided his hands through the crimping process with the same patient focus she brought to everything. Her fingers were warm against his, her voice soft as she explained the technique Abuela had taught her as a child in El Paso. This, Marcus thought, This was what he'd been missing during all those years of autopilot ambition. Not the empire or the acquisitions or the corner office. This. Connection, humor, someone who challenged him to be better while accepting exactly who he was. Perfect, Lena declared, examining Marcus's empanada. See, Richard? That's what happens when you listen. That's what happens when you're dating the teacher and get private lessons, Richard muttered, but he was smiling. They finished the batch together, Lena directing, Marcus and Richard following orders, while other employees drifted through the break room. Some joined in, asking questions about recipes. Others just grabbed coffee and watched, smiling at the casual domesticity of their CEO in an apron, covered in flour, completely unbothered by the informality. Later, after Richard had left and the empanadas were baking, Lena and Marcus found themselves alone in the break room. The same break room where he'd opened the wrong lunchbox 9 months ago and accidentally changed his entire life. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Lena asked, leaning against the counter. "When I caught you with my lunch?" I apologized. "You didn't believe me." "Before that, you said it smelled like a memory you couldn't place." She smiled. "What memory was it?" Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. "I think it was a memory of being human, of connection and care and the kind of love that shows up in homemade food and handwritten notes. I'd forgotten what that felt like. And now I remember every day." He crossed to her, pulled her close. "You taught me that empire building isn't the same as life building. That success without connection is just expensive loneliness." Lena reached up, brushing flour from his cheek. "You taught me something too. That visibility isn't the same as vulnerability. That I could be seen completely and still be safe." Her voice softened. "That I could be loved for exactly who I am, not who I learned to be to survive." The timer beeped. Empanadas ready. But neither of them moved, caught in this moment of perfect clarity. Two people who'd found each other in the middle of their own carefully constructed lives and decided to build something new together. "I love you," Marcus said, in case that wasn't clear. "It's pretty clear, but I never get tired of hearing it." Lena kissed him, soft and sure. "I love you too, even though you're still a billionaire with terrible work-life balance." "I'm working on the balance part." "I know. I have the spreadsheets to prove it." Marcus laughed, and the sound felt like freedom, like permission to be more than the CEO, more than the empire, more than anything except the man who'd looked inside a lunchbox and accidentally found his way home. In the end, this story isn't really about a lunchbox, an empanada, or even a billionaire who learned to slow down. It's about the courage to be seen completely. To let someone past all your carefully constructed defenses, past the sarcasm and the professional polish and the walls built from years of being invisible or too visible, overlooked or too scrutinized, and trust that what they find will be enough. It's about understanding that love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, though sometimes it involves both. It's about daily choices, learning to crimp dough together, showing up for Sunday dinners, fighting for each other even when it costs something, believing that connection matters more than strategy. It's about two people who are running on autopilot, one through ambition, one through survival, who crashed into each other and decided that being awake, even when it's terrifying and complicated and messy, is infinitely better than sleep. Marcus and Lena built something rare, a partnership where power didn't corrupt intimacy, where vulnerability wasn't weaponized, where love meant celebrating each other's strength rather than needing each other's weakness. They proved that you can fall for someone across every boundary society builds, wealth, position, background, and still build something honest. Still build something true. The empanadas helped, but mainly, it was the willingness to try. If this journey moved you, if it made you think about the walls you've built, the connections you've been too afraid to reach for, the ways you might be running on autopilot through your own beautiful, complicated life, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Tell me what resonated, what challenged you, what made you feel. And if you believe that some stories don't just entertain, but remind us how to be courageously, messily, impossibly human, subscribe and join me for the next journey. Because there are so many more stories to tell about people who choose connection over safety, vulnerability over polish, and love over everything that makes sense. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and remember that sometimes the most transformative moments of your life start with something as simple as opening the wrong lunchbox.